Hey, how you doing, everyone? Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, welcome to Tooling Made Easy by Niagara Machine. I'll be your host. My name's DJ White. I've been with Niagara for about 13 years now. Currently, I'm an outside sales rep. I've also been involved as a branch manager and heavily involved in our R&D and training programs. With that being said, let's get started. A couple questions we have to ask ourselves before we even get to tooling is we got to evaluate the existing floor. What's on it, if anything? Is there epoxy? Is there tile, VCT, ceramics? Is there any type of dirt buildup or any type of other coating? We have to determine what's on the floor because we have to remove that before we can do anything else to the floor. After we determine and evaluate the existing floor, we need to figure out what's our end result. We got to figure out where we were at and where we're going to before we get started. Are we going to be putting down our Dyma Pro UV? Are we going to polish the floor? Are we going to install terrazzo, an EDS floor, Dyma Pro TLC, epoxy, or whatnot? All those things are determining factors as far as our tooling selection. How will we get there? First thing, if we want to refine the surface, we've got to grind the concrete, hone it, semi-polish it, and polish it. That would be a polished system. Grinding is going to be our first steps, our metals, our 30 metals, our 70 metals. That usually gives you a rough profile. It's not going to have any sheen. That would probably be suitable for some type of coating or epoxy. You move up into your steps, you get into your honing steps. These are your hybrids, your middle steps, your 50, 100, 200 grits. That's going to give you a little bit of a sheen, almost more like a matte finish if you wanted to equate it to polish, to painting. Our next step would be semi-polish. At this point, that's our 400 grit. Semi-polish is going to give you that satin finish. It's going to be a little shinier than our home concrete. Then, of course, we have polished. Our highly polished floor, that's going to be our 800 grit and up. That's going to give you that more clarity, that watery look where you almost think that there's something wet on the floor. Remember, we talked about what's on the floor. There could be VCT ceramic. There could be tile that we have to remove before we even get to those steps. Now, we'll go over a couple of the blades used to do that. We have our flat tile blade here. These tile blades are flat because they're made to get underneath the tile and pop it up. It's great for VCT, hardwood floors, things of that sort. We move over into our carpet blade. Carpet blade's just like a tile blade, except for it's got this 90-degree turns right here, these blades. That way, when you're cutting carpet, it's going to cut rolls up, little strips, either 6, 8, 10, 12 inches wide. If you tried to use a flat blade to remove carpet, you'd be trying to pull up a whole roll at once. Carpet blades, they have these nice little edges on it to cut the strips out of it. Moving into more cementitious type tiles and stuff like that, ceramics, granites, marbles, things like that, they're usually set in a cementitious material called thin set, so they're going to be really stuck to the floor. We use these carbide tip scraper blades right here to be able to pretty much essentially go in and bust those tiles out of there versus popping them up like we do with our flat tile. So just remember, if you've got any type of hard tile, then you're going to want this carbide tip tile blade. Also, I know a couple of you probably have some questions. Please just make sure you put those questions into the chat. We're going to go over those at the end. Carbide scrapers are another way if we've got something on the floor. After we remove typically tile or carpet or whatnot, we're going to have glue or something left on the floor. If we have glue left on the floor, it's always a good idea whenever you're scraping with your flat blades to go ahead and scrape your floor as much as possible whenever you're removing tile or anything. You want to remove as much of that adhesive or whatever's on the concrete before you ever get up to your grinder. What that's going to do is help save you time as far as your grinding or removing process. Carbide scrapers, we'll go over those for a second. What this is an 8-sided carbide. You put it underneath your planetary and it essentially just goes around and scrapes the floor clean. These are great for removing glue and mastic, sticky materials. This isn't so much of a coating removal tool like trying to remove epoxy or urethanes or things like that. We'll get into that here in a second. But if you do have any type of glue or mastic sticky things that you need to get off the floor so you can get your diamonds to the floor, carbide scrapers are a great piece of tooling that's come out in recent years that help out with that. Speaking of coating removal, there's one piece of tooling out there to use for coating removal. It's called PCDs. They come in cup wheels. They come on pieces of tooling for your planetary. PCD stands for polycrystalline diamond. What that is, it's a man-made diamond. If you really wanted to look at it, it's almost like two little carbide claws that claw through the coating. If you have a 20 mil coating on the floor and you're trying to remove it with your regular metal bond diamonds, essentially all you're doing is trying to sand through that coating, which could take forever. Time is money, as we all know. PCDs, what that's going to do, that's going to rip and claw away at that coating, getting rid of it faster. That way you can get to your diamond grinding or whatever other type of prep you need to use. We have multiple types of PCDs here. First one I'm holding is what we call a full PCD. We just have a plate here that goes onto a machine. It's got two PCDs on it. This is going to be our most aggressive PCD. It doesn't have anything that stops the PCD from digging in. If we don't want that aggressive of a PCD, we can move over to our PCDs with carbide wear bars. Looks just like our previous PCD, but it's got two wear bars here. They act as brakes. That prevents the PCD from digging in as deep. So if you're worried about damaging the concrete because you're going back with a thinner middle coating, or you may have to polish it where scratches are going to be really important not to have, this will help out a lot, because once again, those carbide bars, they act as a brake, preventing that PCD from digging in so deep. Now there's a third type of PCD, which I would put this one in the middle as far as being aggressive. What it does is just like the other PCDs, you have your two PCDs here, but you have a 30 grit diamond wear button here. This 30 grit button does a couple things. It acts as a brake similar to our carbides, but it is a 30 grit diamond. So what that does, it acts as a brake, but it also grinds behind this PCD to help remove some of the scratches and damage left by PCDs. So you have a couple different options. Also, if you have smaller machines, you may need to use the full PCD just to help it be more aggressive. And then on your larger machines, you may want to use one of these with the brakes that prevents it from digging in so fast. All right, once we got our tile off the floor, our glue, removed our coatings, whatever, now we're finally down to concrete. What do we do with the concrete? First thing we want to do is we want to get out our Mohs hardness test kit. What this is are called scratch tests. We've got 8 different hardness tips here. Number 2 being the softest, which is plastic, and then number 9 being the hardest. We call this a scratch because essentially we're trying to take the tips of these pins and make scratches in the concrete. Whenever you're using the scratch test, you just want to use the same amount you're using signing your name or filling out a form. You don't want to like press down really hard and try to gouge or stab the floor. You're essentially taking it like a pen and just pulling it across the floor. I like to start with the number 9. The number 9 is going to be your hardest tip. That should almost always leave a scratch in the floor. That way we can determine what a scratch looks like, what we're looking for. You take your number 9, pull it across the concrete. If it scratches, that means our tip is harder than the concrete. We keep working our way down to the number 8 tip, to the number 7 tip. We get down to the tip that doesn't scratch the concrete. Now we have matched up the hardness of our Mohs hardness test tip to the hardness of the concrete. Let's just say, for example, I'm running through my progression. My number 9 scratches, my number 8 scratches. Now my number 7 does not scratch. I'm going to call that floor a number 7 floor. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything until you look at our little chart here. As you can see, we have the Mohs scale related to the different hardness concrete diamonds. As you can see, number 2 to 3 be yellow series for soft concrete. 3 to 5 be gray series for medium concrete. 5 to 7, red series for hard concrete. 7 and 9, you can use our gold or white series for super hard concrete. Now, we go back, we remember we said our floor was number 7. Well, as you can see, there's always overlapping numbers. You have a number 7 that we could use red series for hard concrete. We have a number 7 that we could use our gold or whites. What does that mean? All right, let's talk about diamonds a little bit. We have our metal bond diamonds here, and we're going to talk about how they're made. We have a metal bond diamond here. I always like to use this reference. People laugh at me, but if we want to look at this diamond segment like a chocolate chip cookie, our chocolate chips are our diamonds, our dough's the bond. The bond is how hard the material is that holds these diamonds together. So soft concrete is notoriously abrasive. Soft concrete's going to want to wear your diamonds out faster than hard concrete. So soft concrete being abrasive, what do you think we need to withstand that abrasive concrete? We need the bond, the dough, the stuff that holds this diamond together to be hard to withstand the abrasiveness of soft concrete. Opposite goes for hard concrete. Hard concrete's hard to cut, just like physics. Something soft's easier to cut than something hard. Hard concrete's harder to cut, so the bond or dough that holds those diamonds together is soft. It wants to release those diamonds faster to help cut hard concrete. So if you don't know anything else about diamonds, just always remember soft concrete diamonds last a long time because they have a hard bond. Hard concrete diamonds cut fast because they have a soft bond. I can give you one or the other. It's almost like horsepower and gas mileage in your car. I can raise one but raise the other. So you can either have life with soft concrete diamonds or speed with hard concrete diamonds. The harder the concrete the diamond's designed for, the faster it cuts. The softer the concrete the diamond's designed for, the longer it lasts. So if we go back to our Mohs scratch test, as we can see, 5 to 7, 7 to 9, we have two different options. Why do you think that is? All right, that gives us the ability, it's saying we can use the red series for hard concrete. That's going to last longer than if we use the gold series or the white series for extra hard concrete. The extra hard concrete diamonds are going to cut faster. The red hard concrete diamond's going to last longer. What do we like as contractors? We like speed. So typically whenever I have that overlapping number, if it's a 5 or a 7, I always go to the harder concrete diamond because that's going to cut faster. It's going to give me a little better cut, and it's not going to wear the diamond out prematurely. Speaking of using diamonds, there's a big misconception of the speed that people run diamonds underneath their grinders. Electric grinders, you need to be around 550 to 650 RPMs. Now keep in mind, electric grinders are, the RPMs are by the head speed of the machine. If we go over to a propane machine, we're going to want those RPMs around 2,900 RPMs. But that is the RPMs of the motor. Motor RPMs on a propane machine at 2,900 is going to equate to around 550, 650 RPMs head speed, much like an electric machine. Now we'll go over some different types of metal bond tooling. Buttons, bars, stars, there's tons of different configurations out there. Today we're going to focus on buttons and bars because that's a lot of what we do. We try to simplify things and not overthink it. Buttons and bars. Bars are going to be more aggressive. If you look at this bar, you know it's going to be more aggressive than this button. Why? Because it has right angles on it, right? So those right angles are going to cut the floor a little better because you have this right angle pushing around. If you've got any leftover glues or mastics or a little bit of residual stuff on the floor, bars are going to do a little better job removing than buttons. Also, bars are going to gouge the floor up a little more than a button will. What I mean by that is if I ran a 30 grit bar and I ran a 30 grit button side by side and I brought you into a room and said which one's the more aggressive grit, you would usually pick the one that I used the bars on. Well, the grit's the same, but the configuration of the diamond's different, making it more aggressive. These bars have these right angles, so when they're going around on the floor, and as we all know, most floors are not flat, they're going to have little bird baths and variations in them. So when this right angle comes around and catches one of those high spots in the floor, it's going to gouge up the floor and leave the scratch a little bit deeper than the actual diamond does. So bars are going to leave the floor a little more gouged up, which guess what? That's great depending on what coating you're putting down. You may want those scratches, those deeper scratches, which we'll get into surface profile here in just a minute. Also, the surface area of the bar is slightly smaller than the button. So what that does is it gives you more down pressure. Something weighing 600 pounds sitting on something smaller is going to have more down pressure than 600 pounds sitting on something bigger. Also, we have singles and doubles. As you can see here, we have a single button configuration, we have a double button configuration. Well, why do we have that? And we have a single bar configuration and a double bar configuration. Here's the reason we have those. We have different configurations for doubles and singles due to the size of the grinder. I talked about it just a minute ago as far as down pressure. That's what you need to cut a floor is down pressure. So smaller machines, 550 pounds, around a 20-inch grinder and below, we like to use single buttons and single bars because that gives us the correct amount of down pressure for that size of grinder. We get into larger grinders, 25-inch and up, we'd like to move over to doubles because we're wanting to try to divide that weight up into a bigger footprint. So smaller grinders, singles, larger grinders, doubles. You would never want to put a double on a real small grinder because that's going to prohibit it from cutting as well because of the footprint being so big. I always do a little demonstration in my trainings. I'll go over to somebody and take my finger and press their arm and say, does a pound of pressure hurt you? And they're like, no, that doesn't hurt. Now I ask them, what if I was going to take a needle and apply that same pound of pressure to your arm? Would you like that? And they're like, no, that would hurt. The pounds of pressure didn't change. The surface area of what I was using, my finger versus a needle, changed. That's what made it more aggressive. It wasn't the pressure, it was the surface area of what you were using. Much like diamonds, 600-pound grinder sitting on 9 of these isn't going to have as much down pressure as a 600-pound grinder sitting on 9 of these. So just be aware of that's the reason we have doubles and singles. If you use the double on a small grinder, it wouldn't cut that well because the footprint's too big. If you use the single on a larger grinder, you may be putting that grinder under too much stress because the surface area is too small. Let's take a look at this video. All right, just a short little video showing you metal bond grinding. After we get done with our metal bond tooling, we move over into our hybrids. The reason we call them hybrids is because they're usually made up of 2 different materials, just like a hybrid car, battery and gas or whatnot. Some people call them transitionals because you're moving from a transition from a metal bond diamond trying to get to your resins, which is our next step. Hybrid tooling is usually going to be your 50, 100, 200 grit. That's going to help you remove those metal scratches before you get into your resin steps. Also, it's going to create a much smoother profile for your thinner mill coatings. After we get done with our hybrid steps, what do you think's next? You guessed it, resins. Resins are going to be our 400, 800 on up from there. What resins are going to do is give you more sheen, going to make the floor smoother. And actually, if you run up through the grits high enough, that's where we get to polish. The higher the grit, the smoother and shinier the floor is going to be, much like sandpaper. All right, here's a quick little chart if you want to have a quick reference for what polishing looks like. As we talked about, the first thing you have to do is remove anything that's on the concrete before you can polish the concrete, right? So whether that's scraping tile up, PCDs for coating removal, using our carbides to remove that glue or whatnot. Once we get all that done, typically our first grit that we start with is our 30 grit. 30s and 70s are going to be your grinding steps. Honing is going to be your hybrids, your 50, 100, 200. Then, of course, our polish is going to be our higher steps, 4, 8, 1500, 3000, however high you want to go. Also, remember, whenever you're going up in diamond grit, let's say we go from a 30 grit metal to a 70 grit metal, that diamond gets half as big. So that means the scratches are half as deep. So just like with sandpaper, whenever you run through that progression, you're taking deep scratches and replacing them with smaller scratches. Then the next step, replacing them with smaller scratches until you don't have any scratches. And that's how that process works. Once you get done with your floor, there are ways to measure a couple things on a floor that we look for. We look for gloss and DOI. Gloss, as you know, it's exactly what it sounds like. How shiny is the floor? That can be achieved from a couple different ways, though. It can be achieved from our mechanical process that we talked about, metal bond grinding, honing, polishing, or it can be achieved with a coating or a sealer. So gloss can be achieved a couple different ways. I like the other measurement there, DOI. What does DOI stand for? DOI stands for distinction of image. That's how sharp the reflection is in that concrete. We all know a mirror is a 100% DOI because that is an exact reflection of yourself. So we do have a way to measure that on floors. Typically, this can't be added superficially with sealers or a coating. DOI is achieved through the actual mechanical refinement process that we just spoke about. All right, on to concrete surface profiles, CSPs. This is going to be for the coating people. Different coatings call for different surface profiles. Some coatings will call for a grit of sandpaper. Floor must feel like a 70 grit. Okay, well, we know we'll just run our 70 grit diamond. That'll give us the profile we need for those coatings. Other coatings call for CSP numbers, concrete surface profile numbers. And I do have a mold chip set here that I can show you. This is by the ICRI, International Concrete Repair Institute. What this is, it's a standardized chip set, number 1 through 10, 1 being pretty smooth, number 10 being super rough. Each coating is going to call for its own CSP number. You have to look at it almost like building a foundation for a house. The smoother the profile, typically the thinner the coating. Heavier the profile, the thicker the coating. Thicker coatings need more to hold onto than a thinner coating. Just like a skyscraper needs a better foundation than your home because of the weight and how much it is holding and supporting. So people call us all the time and they ask us, hey, I got an epoxy. What diamonds do I need? Always remember to check your data sheets for each product you're using. It's going to tell you exactly what needs to be done to that floor and how it needs to be prepped for that particular coating in that particular environment. Once you find that out, we can help you achieve that number. Certain ways to go about it. Our number 1 and number 2 profile, those can be achieved by diamond grinding. Our metal bond diamonds, 16 grit, 30 grit. Now you start getting to the number 3, 4, and 5 profiles. Those are going to be a little rougher. It's going to be too rough to diamond grind, so you're going to have to either do a couple things. You're going to have to scarify, shot blast, or use bush hammers to achieve a greater profile. There we go again, showing the chip set. And as you can see it being laid across the floor, that number 1, see how smooth that is? That's something you can achieve by diamond grinding. Number 2 is the same way. The other ones are so rough, you'll have to use something else like we talked about. Here's just a quick reference guide. Once again, you'd always want to go to your particular data sheet for your particular coating to make sure we do the right surface profile. But this just kind of gives you an idea of the thinner coatings don't require as much profile as some of the heavier coatings. You heard me talk about it just a minute ago. Bush hammers is also a new piece of tooling that's been introduced over the years. What this does, it rolls across the ground. These little spike rollers pretty much pulverize the cap of the concrete, popping it up, exposing that rough looking floor underneath it. This has been made, and it really helps reduce the need to buy another piece of equipment such as a shot blaster or a scarifier or something like that. All you need to do is buy another piece of tooling. That way you can achieve that higher number 3, 4, and 5 profile. Let's take a quick look at this video of bush hammers being ran. All right, outside of that, we do have some specialty tooling here at Niagara. It's our DymaPro System Star Cutter. It all started with this white star. Floors are getting harder and harder to cut. Remember in the beginning we talked about evaluating floors. One of the things you also need to look at in this day and age, the way concrete's being finished, is how tightly power child the floor is and how much sealer or cure and seal that it may have on it when you step onto the floor. When I talk about burn and power trials, those whirly birds with the blades underneath it that you see people going across the concrete, what that does, they're help trying to trowel that down and smooth that concrete out. Well, what can happen is they can keep running so many steps that they get to a step which we call burning. That means they've almost turned the concrete black and they power trowel the concrete till it's like super tight and it's already got a sheen. Well, the tighter the concrete, the harder it is for us to break open and get it ground. So years ago, we came up with our white stars. These are what we call maybe our cap cutters, trying to cut through that initial hard cap of concrete. We have these in 1, 2, and 3 star configurations. Just like we talked about with single bars and double bars, single buttons and double buttons, we have different configurations for different size grinders. You guessed it, smaller grinders, single buttons, medium grinders, size grinders, double stars, and then larger grinders are 3 stars. So our white bond is a specialty bond. It is designed to help cut those harder concrete. The design got so popular, people really liked it. We also created it in soft concrete and medium concrete. Much like we talked about with bars having those right angles and they can help remove some of the residual glues or mastics or anything that's on the floor, more so than a button. Same preface behind our stars. People love the white star configuration so much that we created these because look, all these cutting edges and everything, they do a great job removing those residual glues and mastics. Once again, these also come in a single star, double star, or triple star, depending on your size of grinder. Here at Niagara, we've got tooling that fits pretty much every grinder manufacturer out there, whether you got a SACE, CPS, whoever it may be, we have tooling to fit your grinder. So since we're talking about different types of tooling, I wanted to talk a little bit about cup wheels and hand pads. We didn't go through that earlier, but I want to do that now. Same preface that goes for diamond cup wheels and things of that sort, just like with a planetary grinder. We have stuff to go to our hand grinders that match up with our planetary grinder. Once again, what did we talk about in the beginning? What's on the floor? If you do have a coating or whatnot, we have PCDs. Same PCD technology that's in our planetary tooling on a cup wheel. Same thing. We're looking to rip away that coating instead of trying to sand through it per se with a metal bond cup wheel. So after you move your tile or whatnot, or you have coating on the floor, this PCD is going to rip through that. If you do have glues and mastics, we don't have carbide cup wheel, but what we do have here is an AeroSeg cup wheel. This AeroSeg cup wheel does really good with glues and mastics because one, it's got an arrow. It helps split that glue and mastic, getting the diamond segment down to the ground. Also, it has a slight rake to it, which is going to help lift that glue and mastic. Once again, the object is trying to get this diamond segment to the ground. Diamond segment, glues can wreak havoc on diamond segments. So that's the reason we use all this different tooling, trying to get that glue up or get it out of the way to be able to get our diamond to the floor. Once we do that, we have a couple different style cup wheels. This is our 10 and 20 seg 5-inch cup wheel. We also have everything in 7-inch. What do you think this is for? This one's going to be more aggressive than this one. Why? You guessed it, has less segments on it. Just like our single buttons are going to be more aggressive than our double buttons. So depending on what you're doing, you may need a 10 seg or you may need a 20 seg. That way it doesn't dig in and cause quite as much damage. Also, please remember, most cup wheels out there, unless the grit is specified, they're going to be a 30-40 grit. We do have some cup wheels that do have the grit specified. Here we have our continuous rim turbo cup wheel. As you can see, the diamond segments are very close together, a lot closer than this. Does it have all these right angles right here on the edge that's very rough on my hand? This one's a lot smoother. So this is going to give you a smoother profile than this cup wheel will. Also, it comes in 3 different grits: coarse, medium, and fine. That's a 30, 70, and 120 grit. So you can follow along with the grits that you use for your planetary grinder. After you do your metal bond grinding, we have ceramic cup wheels. If you wanted to look at these as your hybrid step, your middle step, we're using these ceramics to remove the metal scratches we put in the floor. Once we use this as our hybrid or transitional step, we can move from our ceramic cup wheel over to our resin hand pads. These are our pads that we start to create that sheen and that gloss, much like the resin on our floor. So if you wanted to equate it, these are our resins for our hand grinder. We also have our white star cup wheels in a white stars in the cup wheel configuration. Have them in 5 and 7. Once again, super hard concrete you can't cut, or you just have some things you want to remove, residual glues and mastics that may be on the floor. Our white star cup wheel is going to be the one for you. Just remember, here we are, your nationwide prep to polish. We have a variety of different pieces of equipment and materials. We have grinders, shot blasters, scrapers, HEPA backs, tooling, chemicals, all the accessories to go along with it, and much more. Thank you very much. Please remember Niagara Machine for all your surface prep needs. Right now, will there be any questions? Please remember to put those into the chat. All right, we've got a couple questions here. Tips and tricks for removing glue, types of glues, mastics, and epoxies. All right, well, one of the things we like to do if you're removing any of those types of things, if you're scraping the floor, then you want to use the scraper to try to remove as much of that as possible. So if you're removing tile or carpet, you're going to have that glue underneath. Let's use that scraper blade to remove as much of that as possible. The more we get off with our scraper blades, the easier it's going to be for our diamond tooling. Once we get over into our diamond tooling, we have a couple different options. Remember, we have our carbide scrapers. Carbide scrapers are going to be good for those stickier materials like glues and mastics. If you have a true coating like an epoxy or a urethane, then remember we need to fall back to our PCDs to remove that first. Let's see what else we got here. All right. Are there any other types of carbide blades we can use, or are the scraper blades our only options? All right. I'm not sure if we're talking about carbide blades for your grinder or your actual tile scraper. But as far as our grinder goes, this is the only type of carbide that we have. It is an 8-sided carbide. You can use all 4 sides, then flip it and use the other 4 sides. As far as scraper blades for ride-on tile scrapers or whatnot, we do have these carbides in 2 and 4 inch, and we have our carpet blades and tile blades in multiple sizes as well. All right. What is the value to test hardness and adjust tooling versus trial and error based on feel and grind? That's a great question. A lot of times on job sites, I'll see a contractor using a piece of tooling, say he's using a yellow piece of tooling. That's not working. He'll tell his person, hey, go get the gray ones. Gray ones aren't working. Go get the red ones. Oh, those work great. Now, that's great that they're working, but you don't know why they worked. So whenever you're going to bid a job, go ahead and take your scratch test with you, because you're bidding that job. And guess what? Your tooling is going to have a lot to do with that. If the concrete's really hard, it may take you a little bit longer to grind the softer concrete. But you want to do that scratch test. That way, when you do show up at the job site, everybody has an idea already of how hard the concrete is, as well as you've gotten the appropriate tooling to be able to use. So once again, it comes down to time is money. You're already going to that job to bid it. So go ahead and figure out what bond of diamonds you need then, because you could waste a lot of time during the day shutting the machine down, running out to the truck or trailer and getting another piece of tooling. So once again, it's really just to help you be more proficient. All right, we got another question here. How do we know what diamonds are compatible with our machine? We have a new Lavina 30 propane grinder. All right, that Lavina 30 propane is going to be close to around 1,000 pounds. We want to use double buttons and double bars underneath that machine. We don't want to use the singles because that machine is too heavy to use the single buttons or the single bars. So, like we talked about in the beginning, the size of grinder is going to determine whether you use singles or doubles, and the scratch test is going to determine what bonds you use. This scratch test holds true for almost all grinders. 110 volt grinders, very small grinders, I always like to just throw this out and always use my super hard or extra hard concrete diamonds. Because 110 volt grinder, we're lacking weight and power, so we're going to try to use the diamonds to help it cut. Remember, hard concrete diamonds cut fast, soft concrete diamonds last a long time. We want that 110 volt grinder to cut, so we're going to use those harder concrete diamonds. So if you have a Lavina 30, just remember to always use double buttons or double bars, and make sure you do your scratch test so you're using the right bond depending on the concrete you're on that day. Somebody asked if we can get this in a PDF. I will definitely get with our marketing department. We will be posting this video anytime you want to come back and watch it. All right, difference between hard and soft concrete prep tools and how to know which one to use. Well, we went over it a couple times. Scratch test is going to be critical. This is a very important piece of equipment for you because what this does, it gets the whole job off to the right start versus that, hey, let's throw this on the floor and see if it works today. That doesn't work. Let's run out to the truck and find something else and see if it works. So once again, this scratch test really is going to help you dial into what tooling you need to start with and get you off to a better start than just guessing at it. All right. Can you talk about the adjusting the head weight through different grits when polishing concrete? Also, what head speed adjustments would you recommend at grinding, honing, and polishing? Great question. Most machines have onboard weights, right? We can take the weights back, which is less head pressure. We can put the weights forward, which is more head pressure. If you don't have to use the weights. The weights are there to help increase production. Just like we're talking about head pressure, down pressure. If you got a 1,000-pound grinder and you put the weights down over the head, that diamond tooling is going to have more head pressure, more grinding pressure on it than with the weights back. Whenever you're polishing, whether you use the weights or not, it's fine. You don't have to use weights, or you can use weights. The key is, once you put those weights down, you have changed the head pressure of that machine. If you do that on your first grit, you're going to need to do that every grit after that, because if you take the weights back in the middle of the process, you're changing the head pressure of the machine. And if you've got an extra 200 pounds on your 30 grit diamonds and leave those scratches in the floor, and then you take that head pressure away for your 70 grits, you may not have the weight to remove the previous grits scratches. So if you start with weight, always use weight with every step. Now, you can add the weight in the middle of the process if you would like to, but once again, once you add that weight, never take it away. So whether you start with the weight in the beginning or add it in the middle because you're, say, your first hybrid step, you want to add the weights because you want to make sure you remove all your metal scratches. That's fine. Once you put those weights down, make sure you keep them down for the rest of the process. What diamonds can be used based on jobs, such as epoxy removal, paint removal, glue, sealer, and so on? Well, that just comes down to what you do have on the floor. If you have a sealer on the floor, that could cause a little bit of havoc as far as your metal grinding. So that's the reason you may want to use our white stars to help cut through that sealer, or any type of white diamond. White diamonds are going to be for your super hard concrete. Even though it may not scratch super hard, sometimes sealers and curing seals can act as a shield almost from preventing that diamond from wanting to dig in. So if you've got a sealed floor or a cured and sealed floor, you may want to use a super hard concrete diamond or our White Star cap cutters. If you have epoxies or a true coating on the floor, remember we want to use our PCDs, our polycrystalline diamond, to claw away at that. Then if there's any scratches, we can always come back with our metal bond tooling and remove any of the damage caused by our PCDs. If you've got mastics and glues, once again, if you are scraping, we want to try to scrape all that as much as possible with a scraper before we ever get over to our planetary grinder. But if you do get over to the planetary and you do have some more glue and mastic to remove, our carbide scrapers here that we talked about earlier is going to do the trick for you. What about polished concrete toppings? Do you have systems for those? Yes, we do. We have an assortment of systems. Just depends on which topping you're using. Make sure you contact your local Niagara rep, and he can offer any suggestions. Some of overlays or cementitious coatings, we use buttons for that. You know, talking about buttons and bars, if you're polishing, you're going to almost always want to use buttons. Buttons aren't going to gouge or leave deep cuts in the floor, much like a bar will. Also, somebody had mentioned earlier about speed of the machine. Typically, you can run the machine at the same speed the whole time if it's too complicated to remember changing. But the way I like to do it, I'm keeping my 550 to 650 RPMs on an electric machine, 2,900 RPMs on a propane machine. I'm going to keep that all the way the same until I get to my first polishing step. My first polishing step, I consider my 800 grit. My 800 grit's the one that's going to give me that watery, that really glossy look floor. At that point, I turn my grinder all the way up, almost like a high-speed buffer. It's just going to give you a little more sheen. You don't have to if you're trying to train a crew and don't want to overcomplicate things for them. You can just keep them at that same RPMs throughout the whole process. For your more experienced people, once you get to that first polishing step of 800, go ahead and wick it all the way up. Here's a great question. Can you talk about glazing and what causes it? Does running it reverse deglaze? All right, for you, those of you who don't know, we talk about hard concrete a lot. Hard concrete's hard to cut. It's getting harder to cut these days. So when somebody talks about glazing, here's what they're talking about. Here's how a diamond works. All diamonds new are sharp. These are my sharp diamonds, right? So as we're grinding that concrete, those diamonds are going to want to wear down. Once they wear down and hit the bond, that concrete hits the bond of the diamond, the stuff holding it together, it's supposed to wash away that bond, exposing new diamonds. The diamonds cut, wear down, concrete hits the bond, washes away the bond. That's the typical life of a diamond, how it works. Glazing is when that diamond is going around and cutting and it dulls down, then the concrete hits the bond and it does not wash away the bond. If that bond's not getting washed away, then what that's going to do, you're just going to keep riding on those diamonds until the point where they're just dull and the diamond is almost slick to the face here. Once that happens, you're not cutting, you're not releasing the energy of the diamond anymore. You're just riding around rubbing, because if the bond isn't washing away, that means that bond is still too hard for that concrete, and you still need to go to a harder concrete diamond. Because once you just keep rubbing on the floor and those diamonds are dull, that diamond gets slick, and if you keep going, if it's not cutting, what's it going to end up doing? It's going to build heat. You can build so much heat to where the silver changes to a bronze or coppery color. Once it changes to that bronze or coppery color and it's slick, that's what we call glazed over, because now the diamond is not working correctly. There's ways to get the diamonds cleaned up. Running in reverse, if you do have an electric machine, they'd mentioned running in reverse. Propane machines, unfortunately, guys, we can only go in one direction. Electric machines, you can typically change the direction of it. Yes, that will help deglaze your diamonds a little bit. Another thing that really helps, if you get some silica sand and throw on the ground. Remember we talked about soft concretes, very aggressive and abrasive on diamonds? Well, the sand's going to act the same way. You're going to throw that sand on the floor and grind over it, and what you're trying to do is get that sand to actually wear away at that bond again, getting those diamonds to cut. Also, all diamonds love water. I know the coatings people don't want to hear that, but all diamonds cut better the wetter they are. If you want to spritz a little water on the floor, that's going to help a diamond cut. The more water you add, the more the diamond will cut. Then you just have to deal with slurry. A lot of times when I'm trying to get a set of diamonds deglazed or opened back up, I'll throw some sand on the floor and spritz it with just a little bit of water. Not enough to where it goes everywhere, but just a little bit of water to the point when I grind over it, excuse me, it's dry again. What that does, that water, remember we talked about that diamond building heat and changing colors? Once metal changes colors, it's changing the chemical makeup of that metal. That water keeps that diamond cool and works with the sand, trying to wear away that bond, opening that diamond back up. All right. For reference sake, can you discuss the difference between right rotation and left rotation PCDs and strip certs? Strip certs is another way, it's an old school way of these carbide scrapers. It's a great question. PCDs and carbide scrapers are directional, meaning they can only be run in one direction. These blue ones here are what we call left-hand or counterclockwise rotation. Lavina propane machines are going to take these. Remember we talked about electric machines, they can go forwards or backwards. They can take either one. If you run it in reverse, that's counterclockwise for left-hand rotation. If they run them in forward, that's going to be our black tooling for our right-hand rotation or clockwise rotation. So just remember, whatever machine you have, make sure you get the right directional tools for that, because if you don't, you're going to be riding around on the back of the tooling and it's not going to do anything. What about polished concrete top? We already went through that one. Somebody said, just to be clear, it is labeled on your super abrasive boxes as hard concrete, but a soft bond to expose the diamonds faster. Am I on the right track with that? Yeah, we'll go over that again because it gets a little confusing. Soft concrete diamonds have a hard bond to withstand the abrasiveness of soft concrete. Hard concrete diamonds have a soft bond to release diamonds faster. There are some manufacturers out there that call their diamonds by bonds, and that's the reason we wanted to go over this. So don't ever just tell somebody, go get me those hard diamonds. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about hard concrete diamonds with a soft bond? Or are you talking about hard bond diamonds for soft concrete? So whatever your tooling manufacturer is, like ours, we judge everything by the hardness of concrete. Because when we do a scratch test, what are we trying to figure out? How hard the concrete is. We're not trying to figure out how hard the bond is. We're trying to figure out how hard the concrete is. So don't let it get you confused. Soft concretes have a hard bond to withstand soft concrete. Hard concrete diamonds have a soft bond to release diamonds faster to help cut hard concrete. All right. With the carbide scrapers, how many uses do you get after flipping the tooling? Once again, this is an 8-sided carbide. So we can use all 4 sides, then flip it and use the other 4 sides. These last forever. To be honest with you, I can barely ever remember in all my years selling a bunch of replacement sets of carbides. Carbides actually can be replaced. You do not have to buy this whole configuration again. You can just buy the set of carbides. This is the only piece of tooling that we have that you can actually replace a piece of tooling on the holder itself. The rest of them are complete units that you have to buy each time. Is there a compatible star configuration tooling set that will fit direct onto a Lavina 30? No, unfortunately they won't. Our stars are a trapezoid configuration to fit on other machines. Unfortunately, they do not fit the Lavina machine. The Lavina machine has a different trapezoid back. At that point, you would want to use the Lavina whites, or now they have just come out with a blue cap cutter. So if you needed something to help cut really hard concrete, you could use the Lavina or Super Abrasive, the parent company, their white bars or their blue bars now. So there is an option for extra hard concrete for your Lavina. All right. How important are the different shapes? For example, a round single button compared to a rectangle single. Is it mostly the aggressiveness? You nailed it. It is that aggressiveness. As we can see, you know good and well this right angle bar is going to scratch more than this radius surface. So if you have a thinner mill coating or you're going to be polishing where scratches and gouges are really important, you're going to want to use that button because it's going to leave a smoother profile than the bar, even at the same grit. And once again, this bar is just slightly smaller than the button, so you've got a little more down pressure too. But it's really the configuration. You almost just have to look at it a little common sense wise. The more aggressive it looks, probably the more aggressive it is. So you can imagine this is more aggressive than this just because of the way it looks in the actual size and configuration of the star. Yep, tips and tricks for removing different types of glues and mastics. One thing I didn't talk about, we have this carbide scrapers for glues and mastics. Let's just say you're on a job and you ran across some glue you didn't know you're going to have. You don't happen to have a set of these with you. There's an old school way that we try to remove glues and mastics. Glues and mastics are very sticky, as we know. Whenever diamond tooling sits on top of that, it typically just sits on top of it and rides around. You start to get a lot of smearing and stuff like that. You don't get as much, per se, cutting. The way we cheat that's kind of the same way we talked about deglazing diamonds. If I've got a floor I've got a lot of glue on and I don't have carbide scrapers or a way to scrape that glue up to get started, I'll use my metal bond tooling, but I'll do the same thing. I'm going to broadcast sand into the floor and spritz it with a little water. That's doing a couple things. That sand's giving something that glue to bond to as we're grinding over it. Also, the sand's going to, as we talked about, be abrasive, so it's going to help try to wash away that bond, keeping those diamonds open. And then guess what the water does? Exactly. Keeps everything just a little bit cool because that glue starts to heat up. What's it going to want to do? It's going to want to smear more. So if you don't have a scraper or scraper carbides for your planetary, then you can use your normal metal bond tooling with a little bit of sand and a little bit of water to help remove that glue. Once again, a bar or star is going to do better at the removal than a button. So if you do have some stars or bars with you, that would be the thing to use. And also, of course, you can run out to any store and get sand and water versus running out. You may not be able to run out somewhere and get these on a Saturday if you're in a jam. So just remember that if you're ever in a jam with glues and mastics and you don't have any type of scraper with you. All right, say you have a 400-foot garage, minimum imperfections, medium hardness, and you have a 25-inch propane grinder. How long should it take to grind that amount of space? All right, let's talk about that. Great question. Production rates for grinders. What we're looking at, 20-inch propane, you're going to get about 500 square feet an hour. Now, this is grinding concrete. If we're removing 40 mils of epoxy, that's not going to be 500 square feet an hour, maybe closer to 250, 300 square feet an hour. But we're talking about just grinding, like you talked about, just grinding concrete, minimum imperfections or whatnot. So that 20-inch propane is going to get you about 500 square feet an hour. You step up to their grinder, a 25-inch propane, you're going to be around that 800 square feet an hour. Weight times power equals production. It applies for a lot of different things, whether it's a pickup truck or a lawnmower. Weight times power equals production. We go to a 30-inch grinder. Now we're looking at somewhere around 1,000 square feet an hour. You move up to a 32-inch grinder, we're looking at close to 1,200 or 1,400 square feet an hour. Then you can get to our big boy, the Lavina 38. That's going to get you close to 2,000 square feet an hour. So whenever you're looking to buy a grinder, just like if you're going into the landscaping business, you would want to buy the right lawnmower for what you're doing. If you're doing nothing more than garages, you're probably not going to need a Lavina 38. We'd be happy to sell you one, but you're going to be spending more time backing it up and moving than you're actually going to be going back and forth. So buying the right grinder for the right size jobs, and that production rate is what you need to go on. So 500 square feet an hour, 20-inch grinder, 800 square feet an hour, 25-inch grinder, 1,000 square feet an hour, 30-inch grinder, 1,400 square feet an hour, 32-inch grinder, around 2,000 square feet an hour for a 38-inch grinder. Also remember, a lot of times when you initially cut a floor, you may have to cut it more than once to get it right. They talked about minimum imperfections on the floor, but there's still these low spots, little bird baths in the floor. So typically whenever I'm cutting a floor, yeah, I'm getting 500 square feet an hour, and let's say we have that 400 square foot garage, and they're using a Lavina 25, so it's more 800 square feet an hour. It should only take them about a half an hour to cut that floor in one direction. But if the floor is not completely cut, we have to do a lot of times what we call a crosshatch cut, taking the same grit on your first step. Once you cut it north-south, then come back with the same grit and cut it east-west. We call that crosshatch cutting. That's going to give you a better cut, and it's going to come at the low spots in the floors at different angles, helping you get to those. All right, looks like we're running out of time here. Let's see if we got one more question here. Yep. Can you touch again on bush hammers and what scenarios those are used for? Yeah, our bush hammers, remember, these are going to go around the floor and pulverize that floor. Bush hammers are going to be good if you have a cementitious coating you need to remove, not an epoxy or urethane, but a cementitious coating. So they do great for removing cementitious coatings. These spike rollers want something hard to hit. They want to hit it and fracture it and bust it. If I ran this over a urethane deck coating, I'd do nothing but put a bunch of little dimples in it. So it's going to be good to remove those types of coatings. But the main thing it's used for is to prep concrete. It's going to give you those rougher profiles like we talked about in the beginning. You know, our CSP numbers. If you need a 4 to 6 for a urethane cement, then if you don't have a shot blaster or a scarifier, the way to achieve that is bush hammers. So bush hammers, in short, are good to remove cementitious coatings. Also, bush hammers are great for achieving a higher CSP than diamond grinding will. All right, I think that's all that we have time for. Thanks everybody for attending, and we will have this available for you to review in the future. Thanks and have a great day.